Ladies and gentlemen, mesdames et messieurs, good morning. Thank you for being with us today. We are very pleased to welcome you in a brand new format. Today marks our 19th edition of the Private Equity Exchange Summit and Awards, and we are proud that our teams have been able to make it happen. Like many of you, our company, Leaders League, had to explore new areas and innovate to overcome tough months. I would like to personally thank our teams and talents who have been the pillar of our success, but also our partners, sponsors, and speakers that have made this 19th edition such a memorable millésime. Like all of you, we are looking forward to a better sanitary and business environment. Meetings, real events, cocktails. Fortunately, these important moments of conviviality will soon be possible again. Meanwhile, we are here today with you, live, with 4 studios, 25 panels, and more than 100 of excellent speakers. We hope you will enjoy this day and the videos that will be available in replay on the Private Equity Exchange official website. To open this exciting day of exclusive content and debates, we wanted to gather inspiring leaders, individuals who, by their commitment, have accomplished great things for their firms, but also for the private equity industry itself and its future. We are going to hear their leaders' secrets, their traps to avoid, their tips, and the new Eldorados they're chasing. Without any delay, I am thrilled to introduce Dana Heimoff, Managing Director at JP Morgan Asset Management and co-founder of Level 20, the non-profit organization set up to encourage women to succeed in the PE industry. Good morning, Dana.
Good morning.
And Peter Prowl, Managing Partner, Chief Executive and co-founder of Triton Partners. He's built with his team one of the most dynamic and respected European GP, currently investing a €5 billion vehicle through 12 offices in the world. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning to you. Thank you for having us.
Thank you. So to all of you, thank you for being connected this morning. Welcome and enjoy this opening keynote conference. Dana, Peter, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much. And again, we are delighted to be here. We have a lot to discuss, so we're just going to jump right into it. Peter, you and I have known each other for a long, long time. I think the first time we met was 1997 when you had just started out raising Triton 1. And then when I moved to London, I led the investment in Triton 2 on behalf of JP Morgan. And I think the rest, they say, is history. And what a journey it's been. And I think just to set the stage for those that are listening that are less familiar than most of us are about Triton, is can you tell us a little bit about that journey and where you started out with Triton and where you're taking Triton today?
Yes, and thank you, Dana, as well, and thank you for supporting us. And I think for all of us in the industry, know you well, you're that smart, demanding, focused, but also very pleasant LP to work with. So it's been a pleasure of about 25 years now. I think for all of us who work in private equity over a longer period, we do it because of the love for what we do. And what I think all of us at Triton, because Triton really is a team, and it's teamwork, and I happen to be here today, but many of you will know Martin Hoot, Klaus von Herman, Thomas Hovenstam, all our sector leaders and so forth. So for us, it's really a team sport. And as a former hockey player, not at the highest level, but relatively high in my youth, I learned to kind of train hard, learn from your mistakes, and figure out that strategy also counts. So when we started Triton in 1997, the idea was to create a European, if you will, alternative to what were predominantly intelligent investors focused on financial engineering at that time. It's exciting to see how long we came. come since then. But the Triton objective was to combine intelligent investing with a, quite a strong, at the time, operational improvement type, which would allow us to buy businesses that others wouldn't want to buy and then fix them and grow them.
Absolutely. And when I look at your overall portfolio, I think you've invested in over 70 investments since 1999. You've realized, I think, over 26 of those. And what strikes me, and one of the reasons why we've committed to you, is your outsized returns. When you look at, I think a quarter of those exits have delivered over 5x returns. And that's just unusual for many firms to accomplish over such a long period of time. And that's definitely what gets us excited as investors in Triton. One of the things I wanted to focus on, and then we can jump back and forth, it is coming back to this team approach. And you early on focused your team on sectors. And I know a lot of groups say we do sectors, but it's more of a calling card to organize the intermediaries to call you. But you guys have lived and breathed it. And obviously we're going to talk later on about some of the interesting things you're doing to really create the value underneath. But talk to us about why your 4 sectors and why the niches in those sectors.
Yes, well, I think it really comes back to where you started, right? It's these 5Xers. And in the early days of Triton, we had a number of 5Xers, 10Xers, but we also had a, relative to the industry, disproportionate amount of investments that didn't perform as well as we had hoped. As we've learned over the years, we've of course decided we want to do more of the 5Xers, not only 25%, but rather 40, 50%. I think you'll see in our funds, we're getting closer to that. And of course, we wanted to reduce the number of investments that didn't perform, while still remaining entrepreneurs and taking some risks, because that's what you need to do, I believe, to create those 5x returns. Now, a prerogative for that, in our view, is that you know what you invest in. If you come back to sort of the old Buffett-Graham theory, the first thing is to understand what you invest in. And I think we like many others, fairly quickly came to conclude, as the markets were maturing after the 90s, it was very important to not only generally understand how you invest and how you operationally improve a business, but how does it actually work in that particular niche, that particular sector? What are the big wins? Who are the right management teams? And today, if we move forward, what's the right digitalization strategy? Where are the ESG traps, but also where are the ESG opportunities? So it's really about knowing your playing field deeper and wider.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. I think when our team started out investing in AT&T's pension plan back in the 80s and the 90s, some of the early investors and backers of venture capital funds, growth funds, and early private equity funds, there was this view that maybe larger was better and more institutional, maybe less risky. And so our group kind of went that way. And then when we came to JP Morgan in 1997, we started seeing, the evolution of this lower mid-market approach. And we were super attracted to that because there's just more levers to pull. Obviously less debt, but more value creation, more buy and build, more fix it. And that's really where we've dug our heels in and stuck to our knitting over time, despite what you see kind of in the macro picture, which we can't time. You've done a similar thing. You've stayed, even though your funds have gotten bigger, you've stayed in the middle market, and obviously you've expanded to the small market as well. Can you talk about kind of why that is? Because a lot of your peers are now doing kind of mega funds and larger size opportunities. I mean, it's harder work in the mid-market, isn't it?
I don't know, actually. I think it's probably a similar amount of work if you have a very, very large company or a very small or in the mid-market. What we see is that this is about risk-adjusted returns. And And I think it's fair to say if you want to get a 5, 7x, 10x investment, that gets harder when you're in the billions of billions. But once you're in the few hundred millions up to 500 million, up to a billion or so on the equity, you can actually drive that. And we are really looking for, as you said, 3, 4, 5 core value drivers. So we're looking to find a broader set, not only one value creation driver, but at least 3. And we're also very much looking to invest in sectors that are growing, in markets that are growing, where the profit pools are growing. Sometimes people ask us, so Triton, you're buying businesses that maybe are in decline or that are in restructuring. That's not what we try to do. Occasionally, we admit we fail. We pick the wrong targets, probably 1 in 15, 1 in 20. But on average, we're trying to buy business that are in nice, attractive, growing markets with growing profit pools where you can benefit from digital ESG, as we said, but that aren't very well run, that we can then fix and expand. And to do that, it's very important to, as you alluded to earlier, have a broader team to work on these different levers. So we have a digital team, we have an operational improvement team, we have a talent management team today also at Triton that works with the portfolio companies to look at the talent, but also to look at diversity, for example, in more detail in each portfolio company, to make sure that they also meet our diversity targets, not only at Triton. But turning it over to you a little bit, Dana, how have you seen that you, the JPM team, you mentioned earlier you started out with AT&T, have evolved with your team? I mean, you're very experienced. You have some of the most experienced professionals in the industry in your team. You have a lot of data that we understand you use. Maybe you can describe to us a little bit how you think about your team and evolving that.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and it is one of our assets. I think private equity, fund investing, and co-investing alongside our GP is an apprenticeship business. And so we have always, kind of gone to the experience of our team through various different cycles, through, the highs and the lows of kind of this herd mentality of committing to private equity. And so one of the things that, we've done over the years is to take all that experience, because we have a very, sticky organization team in terms of not a lot of levers up until I'll get to this part. But also kind of similar to you, it's like keeping the funnel full. And so bringing on new people, usually at the analyst and associate level, and having them grow up in kind of how we underwrite, how we look at the world, how we look at investing in private equity. We're very much about bottoms up. So we love to look at the deals intrinsically. Now, a couple years ago, because, unfortunately, Petter, we're all getting older, and some of us want to, be carried out.
Doesn't look like it.
You're kind. I've used some Zoom techniques here, but some of us will be carried out on our desk chairs, and some of us want to go off and do some other things as they should. And so a couple of years ago, we started planning for succession. And this from your portfolio companies, from your organization. Sometimes that's the best injection you can do in an established organization, is inject some fresh perspective, some diverse perspective, and we'll talk about why we're all pounding the table on diversity, because it's ultimately to drive better performance. And so there was a number last year, including Larry Unrein, who have retired, but it was all completely planned, and that's the best way. When it's planned, it works so much better than when it's just obviously abrupt. And so now we're being co-led by 2 people who have 19 years experience within the PEG, over 22 years, so relatively young, and according to our staff, tenure. And there's about 13 of us who have worked together for on average 21 years. So we still have that experience base, but we're also able to inject some fresh perspective and energy. As you know, this is a very draining industry and very draining business that we do, and so it's really important. So that's one of the things that's changed with us. I think in terms of our strategy, we're still looking for the best risk-adjusted, people to back. and co-investing. And that hasn't changed. We're still, going after and looking on a global basis, early venture capital funds, growth funds, and buyout funds. And the other thing is, I think we like to get in early, like we did with Triton 2, and grow with them. So while you don't necessarily see a lot of turnover in our GPs, what you will see is we'll add some new names, but we really want to continue to back the core relationships and be loyal to them. In turning that back to you, Petter, if I could ask you, how did you find the last year? We can't have this conversation without talking about, the pandemic. And one thing that, always impressed me and struck me as an investor in Triton was you're an all-weather investor. I see at the annual meetings, the 4 seasons, and you can't market time these. You are very mindful of the macro of what's going on and looking at cycles, particularly as it pertained to your kind of industrial focus. But what happened this past year and continuing on it, and how have you done so well? Because you're still active, you're still making investments. You have 2 great new investments early on this year.
Yeah, and then we've also managed to exit a number of businesses, though perhaps not as many as we would have liked. So I think first let me say that I think in many ways this year has been a challenging year on many of you out there, a demanding year, probably in some areas a disappointing year. Results haven't developed as well as one would have liked. Multiples might have, thanks to the central banks and the governments and the public markets. But operationally, I think we all have to recognize that with the exception of a few sectors, that the economy is living on government support to a large extent. Now, having said all that, from a Triton perspective, we're optimists. We are equity investors. We are happy in general, sort of deep down, and we love what we do. So we very quickly, Martin Hoot, Thomas Klaus, myself, in March, April, concluded that let's take on this challenge and let's use it to our advantage. Let's make things better for everyone, whether it's about diversity, whether it's about how we work internally at Triton. Of course, we've all worked and learned how to work with Zoom and Microsoft Teams and this, and we travel less and we save the earth at least a little bit more. So I have to say that I'm hugely impressed and surprised. Having been in this industry for 30 years, I cannot say how happy and surprised I am how everybody in the industry has dealt with this issue. And if it comes down to Triton, we probably come together in many ways, though we haven't been able to see each other as much. And we probably see each other more on screen than we used to see each other in person. We've increased the level of training internally. We've increased the focus on fitness, both physical and mental. And we've seen that our partners, our executives, also others that work at Triton has taken that on, and it largely worked. Now, we're not out of this yet, I think, from an investor LP perspective. And what we tell ourselves is that our investors are our partners. We work for them. Their interests come first. It's something we said when we met the first time. We're here to make them, but also the portfolio companies we work with, happy. And as such, excuses don't count. We concluded very early that this would go on for 2-3 years. Some wise woman told me that pandemics last for at least 3 years, usually longer. And we kind of took that on board. So we planned for 3 years of this already in March, April, May of last year. We adjusted our businesses accordingly, depending on what sector they're in. We've adjusted our valuations a little bit according to that as well. And we decided that we're going to deliver all the results anyways. And I think it is about ambition. It is about speed. And it is about, in the end, the result. So we told, and I think everybody at Triton agreed, do we want to sit here in a year or 2 or 3, like some people did after the Great Recession, or some people did in 2008 2002 and 3 and said, well, you should all still be happy. You get 1.5 times your money, but it was such a bad period that that's really good enough for all of us. No, we decided that we wanted to deliver the multiples that we'd set, 2.5 to 3x, and an IRR, which was about 15% net. And let's figure out how we do that. Anyways, so it's become a lot more digital. It's become a lot more, how can we grow in this environment? Lots more add-ons and yeah, all these things we like to do anyways. We just try to do them in this environment. And I'm so happy that everybody sort of embraced it and actually largely doing it.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, do you think that reason that everyone's kind of come on Zoom, that it's leveled the playing field a little bit? Because obviously you've got multiple offices and you have larger teams, some places versus others. But when you're on Zoom, everyone has the same play, they have the same rectangle box. Do you miss the innovation though? What are some of the pitfalls that you've found? Is it the innovation? Are you seeing, I'm so happy you mentioned wellness, but are you seeing, what are some of the pitfalls, I guess?
I think we hear that you need to get back into the office. We all need to get back into our offices one way or the other. We're missing the interaction. I partly hear that, but I'm not so much for kind of excuses for things not happening and rather trying to find better solutions. So one of the things I think we try to do better is to spend more time thinking. At Triton, we've, over the last 4 or 5 years, worked a lot with investment strategy. What you invest in matters as much as kind of how do you drive value creation. I think we got a bit too far into, we can drive value in any company and make a lot of money irrespective of where it is. And as a result, we made some mistakes and we bought some companies we clearly shouldn't have bought. So before COVID, but also during COVID, we're interacting a lot with our sector teams and thinking about, and that you kind of have to do individually, like the thinking, and then you brainstorm a bit on Zoom. Where are the growing markets? Okay, maybe infrastructure services, maybe in electrical grid, maybe in ESG compliant recyclable furniture, and so on. So we've used this time, probably spend more time on our own, but also more time thinking about what are we going to do in the future. And we own a company called Flecht, for example, where we've had some issues, which is a HVAC air distribution business in buildings. And demand went down. We bought a messier company than we should have bought. Shame on us. But once we bought it, we figured let's make it the European market leader. And of course, for that company, COVID has accelerated its benefit, both from a air quality perspective, but also if you kind of move to having heating and cooling through the air systems, which is more effective than through the floors or radiators, that company can become a great asset that everybody would want to own. Now, we have to think, how do we work with that business to develop that? So a lot of thinking has gone into things during this period that maybe wouldn't have happened otherwise.
Absolutely. And one of the things I remember you and I talking about at an annual meeting and sharing, and it has helped me actually apply that to my due diligence on other firms. But you mentioned, and I won't mention the name of the deal, but you got in there, you tried to put two significant operations together. And in your due diligence, you didn't necessarily focus on the cultural aspects. And those are really hard to dig down when you're doing due diligence to really understand what's the culture, of this company versus that company, and can they come together? And I think about that a lot, actually. Can you talk about how you've kind of learned from that? And how do you kind of avoid that? What are you guys doing to vet that? Because that's a harder KPI to interrogate.
Yes, probably like you and everyone else who's out there listening today, and thank you, by the way, for doing that. We at Triton, we try to recognize as a firm, but also as individuals, what are we good at and what can we become better at? But I think a lot of it is also I recognize what do others know better than I do? And let's defer to them. And that, I think, for example, the whole diversity topic is very important because there are different perspectives that can be brought into things that will make for better investments. Now, so it's very important to try to be broad in this. Now, from our perspective, we concluded some 5, 7, 8 years ago that we were just not good enough at assessing the talent at the companies that we were investing in, but also at Triton. And we decided we needed to bring in talent experts, which had everything from, you can do all these psychometric tests, which, by the way, I took all of them myself and published the results, some good, some not so good. But at least I knew then the way other people thought about me, so that we could adjust. But also, similar for Martin Hoot and others, and we could build a complementary team. Now, one of the key things we learned that we needed to have a much, much better and larger talent team. So today we have a talent team internally at Triton, which works with everyone on a continuous basis, both training, challenging, but also concluding this person is really going to make it to the top and it's important she gets an accelerated track, or this person probably will not. So it's better we communicate with him that he'll be better at some other job. At the portfolio, we brought in a team as well to work with the portfolio management teams to assess them, to help them, to coach them, and to assess this very important cultural aspect that you're talking about. And we're quite cautious about trying to change culture at an investment and to merge two very different cultures. We're happy to improve culture, increase the ambition level, increase the speed, increase the digital awareness, but to completely change the culture of somebody is probably outside of our remit. But we've also concluded that the returns aren't good enough for that. It just takes too long. And I mean, in the end, we've learned, I think, from COVID that if we hadn't learned it before, that people make all the difference. We see within our portfolio companies that some actually do better in COVID. We also see within Triton the same, and it's so important that the people aspect of it. So yeah, you got to be motivated, you got to like what you do, but you also need to feel rewarded and challenged. So we spend a lot of time on that, probably like you, and I know all of you on the LP side track us GPs ferociously about who has joined and who has left and who's what role and what have you. And let me just say that we are getting better at that, and we're thinking about all these issues more and more. But of course, we can still improve, and at Triton that certainly holds true.
Well, one thing that I know you've improved on that I want to talk about, and because it is near and dear to both of our hearts, is diversity. And it's not diversity for diversity's sake or getting to check a box in some RFP. It is really about the culture and the benefits that it can bring to culture. And as a founder of Level 20, you have been a big supporter. But the other thing I wanted to talk to you about is, we've talked about this. In 2016, you got up on stage. You were really one of the first, Petter, honestly, to say, you know what, we're going to make a change. It's not only do we believe in diversity, we're actually going to make a change. And here's the framework. And you laid it out, and you laid that you were starting out at 10% of all Triton investment professionals were women. And you had your 3-year goal and your 5-year goal. And I don't want to take your thunder away, but talk us through how did you manage to beat your targets and do it so well, not just by hiring analysts and associates, but by retaining the women that you did have? And now you have Ruth, you have Beata, you've got senior women in the organization. Talk to me about those statistics and talk to me about how that framework was implemented.
Yeah, that's one way of looking at it, Dana, and thank you. And yes, we have for example, a new COO at Triton, which we haven't sort of externally announced, but that's so it's official here now, if not before, with Beata, who's been fantastic and with us. So she's going to kind of run the internal people side of the investment professionals, but also many other things, which will be a very senior, if not the most senior job you can have at Triton. Working with Thomas, Klaus, Martin, and myself, Andy in the mid-market, smaller mid-cap fund, and so on. Now, so we think there are lots of great women out there. Let's put them to work in the most senior positions. Now, taking a step back, thank you for saying all that. I have to look myself in the mirror and say, I'm embarrassed. Why didn't you do this earlier? You don't have to look around and see what others are doing. You know, we're supposed to lead, and leading from the front means doing things different from perhaps what's been done in the past and what everybody else is doing, and dare to do that. Now, I can be a bit philosophical, and I grew up and I had a very nice growing up period with two fantastic parents, but you know, they were very equal in how they treated each other, and my mother worked, and to me, it was I'd never really seen any problems or any issue of this, and maybe I got blinded by that. So I've always had a very, if I can say so, balanced view. But I've also had the view, and I think we're trying to have the view, if you look at it a bit more philosophically, like you and many others, you know, I like Qigong or yoga, or others look more for Hinduism and these type of things, and not one thing is better than the other. But it's important to keep you fit mentally and physically. That in these ancient cultures, feminine, yang masculine, they need to work together. And if you look at in Hinduism, Shiva, Shakti, and so forth, or if you read the Bible and you talk about in wisdom for Bible, whether it's Hebrew or others, there's men and women, and they work in balance. And we lost a bit of that, I think, through the industrialization and thereafter. And we're just trying to bring it back to where it should be, a balance. And the way we also look at it, which I think I've learned over the years, because I always got told, well, it's about the experience. It's about the experience. You know, these five guys have this huge experience in this, and therefore, how can we take somebody? We can't find somebody who has this level of experience. Okay. I mean, we've concluded, we don't need 55, 60-year-old men sitting thinking about all the judgment calls. You need a diverse group of experiences, some perhaps a little bit older and very experienced in that industry. But we also need, for example, today, younger, digitally, technology experienced people driving change in our companies. Now, coming back to the gender question, it's the same. How can you make decisions about things if you don't have a balance in this? And I do believe that men, and this is probably a dangerous thing to say, men and women are different on average. And we need more of the female perspective into Triton, into our investments, into the leadership of our portfolio company. And we think that will then, A, is the right thing to do, and B, will generate more returns. So we've been working with the diversity of views approach in addition to experience, and I think that's working. But you know, we got a long way to go still.
Yeah, but it's at least, you know, we always say that one of the most important things, it has to come from the top down, and it has to be embraced across the organization. And I totally agree with you. You know, you have to do it together. There has to be a balance. There has to be inclusion, right? Everyone has to be involved. I look at our team, and similarly, you know, we're 60% women and minorities in our private equity group, and the senior, you know, ED and above, 53% are women and minorities. And that's not by, you know, a forced design. We've kind of always been that way because we've never really thought it. We never thought about, oh, should we architect this? Should we balance it? It just, we just all came together based on, you know, experience and liking what we do and sticking around. And I think it's really interesting debate that we have around the table, particularly this past year when we have done a lot of kind of consumer discretionary. And, you know, with consumer, everybody thinks they're an expert, right? Because they're
Sorry,
a
I think
potential
something
buyer.
happened to the sound. Sorry, somebody
Can you hear me now?
interrupted the sound. We didn't hear you.
Oh, can you hear me now? Oh, good. I hear an echo. But we were just talking about, you know, our team and diversity and the impact we have, we believe, on some of our investment decisions, especially those around, you know, consumer, around, you know, the purchasing power and who the buyer of the ultimate products are. And so being aware of that is so important. Petter, I know we've got probably 7 more minutes and we need some time for questions, but one of the last questions I wanted to discuss with you is ESG. And again, you know, I think us in the US sometimes are playing a little catch up to our counterparts in Europe in terms of what does that integration mean? You're taking it, again, a further step of a kind of like how not only do you integrate it, but how do you drive value, or how do you, you know, focus on some of the risk in your portfolio? And you spend a lot of energy, resources, technology on really kind of getting underneath that. And can you talk a little bit about what does, you know, ESG value creation mean to Triton?
Well, you have thank you. You have 3 letters in there: E, S, and G. If we start kind of backwards from the governance point of view, I think that's sort of zero tolerance for everything. And I got the last cyber attack mail from some of our portfolio companies who claim they get mails from me about sending money and so on. So we're very high on this cyber agenda and the governance structures and so on, like many of us are. I think that's very obvious, but difficult to deal with. Nevertheless, on the S front, the social, we talked about diversity, but there's also, you know, treat people the way you'd like to be treated yourself, and act responsibly as an owner. I have fundamentally, having studied in the US and gone to Wharton and been very financially hardcore educated, also at Wall Street, at Morgan Stanley with their buyout groups and M&A and so on, always my roots are, I guess, from the Nordics, where there's a very strong social stakeholder agenda. So we've always believed in that, and we think that's important. And we've missed, for example, in transparency and communication. So we're very keen on communicating our approach to all this to unions and to others that we work with. We think it's important to pay taxes and so on. And we moved Triton from Jersey to Luxembourg to be within the EU, which we felt was important for ourselves and for our stakeholders, as an example. Now, coming to the E, which is probably where most efforts are focused today, at least if you look at the markets, we're looking to invest in businesses that have the kind of the environmental, the CO2, the recycling, sustainability trend in the wind. The wind in the back, as opposed to problems. Now, it's a bit of a tricky one because the world isn't going to change as fast as we'd all like it to be. So I think the trick is to combine the dreams with reality and then invest behind that. And so far, for example, we stayed away from the SPACs. That there's a lot of that going on because we probably think we should really be focusing on working for our investors and their funds, if you will, as opposed to doing something else. But it's a long way to go, and I think, you know, we're looking for input from everyone in this, and we see that there's a lot of government regulation coming in the CO2 emissions, but also in buildings and how much energy they let out, and the air quality I mentioned, Flex. So we're looking to invest in businesses that benefit from this, and where we have businesses that, if you will, ended up on the negative side on this, we're working hard to fix them and turn them into an ESG positive. Now, recognizing the time here, Dana, as one of the founders of Level 20, you asked me, how do you look at this?
Yeah, I think we are, like you, Petter, optimistic. We are, we started it in 2015 and we have, measured the, senior level. It started out at a baseline of, 6% senior women in private equity across Europe. And then the BBCA is releasing another analysis kind of 4 years later, 5 years later. Where are we today? And I think we are pleasantly surprised that the numbers are kind of north of 10%. We still, to your point, have a long, long way to go, but it's moving in the right direction. And I think, how it's moving is also equally as important to what that baseline number is. And we're really focused on the retention now because we've seen a lot of groups, top down, embrace it in their culture, improvements in some of their hiring and throwing the net wider to capture more diverse, at the junior level. But now I think we want to stand by our our shareholders and the community and the industry and say, how do you retain women? And, COVID has not without its challenges in terms of if you had small children and you're homeschooling and you're trying to do your day job, incredibly, incredibly challenging. And it's up to all of us to be super supportive in whatever way we can. But it's that retainment, promotion, and it's about creating a network that, women know they're not alone. And it's also including the men, as you say. I think that vision of the yin and the yang just drives it all home. That's how it has to work. So, pleasantly optimistic, but a long way to go.
Thank you, thank you, Dana.
I know we have a few more minutes. Should we open it up to questions?
Indeed, thank you, Dana. Thank you, Peter. Actually, we have one from Luisa Munareto, who is asking us, and you, both of you, which are your expectations about investors' interest in international cross-border strategies as PE investment thesis? Do you think maybe with the last year we've been through, it will be maybe a more local and native focus, or on the opposite side, do you think it will be even more interesting for cross-border deals?
Petter, do you want to go first?
Yes, I didn't fully get the question.
The question is simply, which are your expectations, Peter, about investors' interests in international cross-border investment thesis, in international build-ups, international stories, the one you're trying and building every day?
I think it will largely remain as it's been. I mean, from our perspective, yes, we had said no to a number of investments in the last 12 months where we felt we couldn't do enough due diligence or where it's a bit hard to assess. But they have also then largely been in COVID-affected markets where we believe that COVID will actually have a longer-term sustainable effect, because it's not only about COVID, it's also about ESG, it's also about digitalization. So yes, we think cross-border will continue, we think cross-border roll-ups will continue, and we think the world will also continue and do quite well through this COVID experience, which I think will continue, by the way, for quite some time.
Yeah, I would just add, many years ago, we looked at backing locals in local markets as opposed to the people that fly in and do deals. I think, that has somewhat changed. I think you need to have a, beyond your border perspective in order to grow your businesses. You need to access, the next country over. You need to access Asia. You need to access the US in terms of, growth or venture capital. So you definitely will see probably a heightened and more intense cross-border activity.
Thank you very much again for your presence this morning, for your both intervention and very interesting. It's not a debate, it's more a conversation between two friends, we understand. And thank you for this clear message, this clear points about your tips, the traps to avoid, and your vision for the next years. Thank you again for all the participants, because through these 45 minutes we reached more than 1,100 participants who subscribed to this event. So we are very happy and glad again. Thank you very much to everybody. Peter, Dana, I wish you a wonderful day. Please stay with us for the rest of the conferences. Now, in a few minutes, in the 4 tracks, so in 4 different studios, you will enjoy people talking about international deals and fundraising, people talking about the management teams and the French market, people talking about turnaround, and of course the turnaround decade we are about to enter maybe, and then the manager's corner for fundraising and growth capital. So again, thank you to both of you. We've been glad and honored to welcome you this morning.
Our pleasure. Thank you so much for your time, and it was a lot of fun. Thank you.
And see you for the 20th edition. I'm sure you will be here, but in person, I hope, in Paris, in December.
So do we.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Have a nice day. Bye.
Thank you.